the autumn of 2017, in a hotel in Riyadh, the phone calls went out one by one. Some of the richest men on earth were invited to dinner. Princes, billionaires, ministers. They arrived in motorcades, and then the doors closed. And they didn't leave for months. The world was told it was an anti-corruption campaign. But what actually happened in that hotel was something much simpler and much older. One family was reminding everyone else who the country actually belonged to. Because here's the thing nobody says out loud. A surprising number of countries on this map aren't really run by governments at all. They're owned by families. Now, you're probably thinking, come on, this is the 21st century. We have elections, constitutions, parliaments. The age of dynasties ended with the guillotine. And on paper, you'd be right. But strip away the paper, and you find something strange. In a Gulf state, the National Oil Company, the Army, the courts, and the Treasury all answer to people who share a single last name. In South Korea, a handful of family empires generate output worth most of the entire economy. In parts of Latin America, one family can own the TV you watch, the bank you borrow from, the beer you drink, and the phone in your hand. These aren't conspiracy theories about secret cabals. There are no Illuminati here. This is something far more real, fully documented, and hiding in plain sight. So today, let's answer one question. How do you go from being a family to owning an entire country? And who's actually doing it right now? In this video, you'll see the 3 different blueprints families use to capture a country. We'll meet the dynasty that turned a patch of desert into a personal corporation worth more than most nations. We'll see how a single family in Asia became so powerful the government once had to pardon its boss because the economy couldn't function without him. And at the end, I'll show you the quietest, most successful family of all, the one that owns a country you'd never suspect without a single crown. Let's start with the most obvious kind of ownership, the kind that doesn't even pretend. Act 1, the owners, the Petro-Dynasty blueprint. Picture the Arabian Peninsula 100 years ago. No skyscrapers, no highways, mostly desert, and a scattering of tribes. Then, in the 1930s, prospectors hit something black and valuable under the sand. And the family that happened to control that patch of desert at that exact moment made a deal that would echo for a century. Here's the blueprint, and it's brutally simple. Step 1, control the land at the moment the resource is found. Step 2, and this is the genius move. Don't separate the family from the state. Merge them. Make the treasury and the family bank account the same account. In a normal country, there's a wall between public money and the ruler's money. Taxes go to the state answers to the people. In a family-owned country, that wall doesn't exist. The oil revenue flows up to the family, and the family decides what trickles back down. And to be clear, a lot does trickle down. That's the deal. The citizens get no income tax, free healthcare, free education, subsidized fuel, government jobs. In exchange, they give up one thing, a say in who's in charge. It's a trade, comfort for control. Now let's talk scale, because the numbers are genuinely hard to hold in your head. The ruling families of the Gulf don't measure wealth in millions or even billions. They control sovereign wealth funds, national investment accounts, worth hundreds of billions to over $1 trillion. To put that in perspective, a single one of these family-controlled funds could buy every team in every major sports league on earth and have enough left over to buy the airlines you'd fly to the games on. And they do buy, quietly, a skyscraper in London here, a famous football club there, a stake in the tech company whose app is on your phone, a chunk of a Hollywood film studio. When you trace the ownership all the way up, past the funds, past the holding companies, you often arrive at a name, a family name. So why didn't these families just get overthrown the way the old kings did? That's the real question. And the answer is Act 2, because there's a second, sneakier way to own a country, one that doesn't need oil or a desert or even a crown. Act 2, the operators, the corporate dynasty blueprint. Let me take you to a country that 70 years ago was one of the poorest places on the planet. Bombed flat. No resources, nothing under the ground worth fighting over. Today, it makes the phone in 1 billion pockets. the ships that carry global trade, the screens, the cars, the chips. It went from rubble to rich in a single lifetime. One of the greatest economic miracles in human history. But here's what they don't put on the postcard. That miracle was built by, and largely belongs to, a handful of families. The local word for these family empires translates roughly to wealth clan. And these aren't just big companies. A single one of them might make your smartphone, insure your house, build your apartment, run the hospital you're born in, and operate the theme park you visit on weekends. From cradle to grave, you can live an entire life inside the products of one family. Now here's the blueprint for this second type. You don't capture the country by ruling it. You capture it by becoming load-bearing. You make the national economy so dependent on your family's companies that the country literally cannot afford for you to fail. You become too big to jail. And I mean that almost literally. There have been cases, real, documented cases, where the head of one of these family empires was convicted of serious crimes and then pardoned or released early, with officials openly arguing that the economy needed him back at his desk. Think about what that means. The justice system bent, not for a king, but for a CEO, because his family's business was load-bearing for the entire nation. This is ownership through indispensability. The family doesn't sit on a throne. It sits at the center of the economy, and everyone, including the elected government, has to route around it. The government changes every few years. The families don't. And if you think this is only an Asian story, look closer to home. In country after country, you find the same pattern wearing different clothes. In parts of Europe, old industrial families still quietly control the banks and the newspapers. In Latin America, the pattern is so concentrated it's almost cartoonish, which is exactly where we're going next. Because there's a man whose family arguably owns more of his country than anyone has owned anything in modern history. Act 3, The Invisibles, the soft power dynasty. Meet the kind of country owner who never wears a crown and rarely raises his voice. In one large Latin American nation, for years, one family controlled the dominant phone company, the one almost everyone had to use. If you made a call, you paid them. They had stakes in banking, in construction, in retail, in media. At one point, the patriarch was, by some measures, the richest person on the entire planet. Not from oil, not from tech he invented, but from owning the pipes the whole economy had to flow through. This is the third blueprint, and it's the most elegant of all. You don't own the government. You don't even need to be the biggest company. You own the infrastructure, the toll booths of modern life, the thing everyone has to pass through. And you collect a tiny slice of almost every transaction in the country, forever. The genius is that it's invisible. Nobody marches in the streets against the phone company. Nobody storms a bank's headquarters with torches. The family captures the country not by force, but by friction. A small, permanent tax on daily life that the public barely notices and can't escape. And this is where all three blueprints rhyme. The Petro family owns the resource. The corporate family owns the production. The infrastructure family owns the flow. Different methods, same result. A handful of people, bound by blood, sitting at the choke point of an entire nation's life. Now here's the part that should genuinely change how you see the news. Once you learn these three blueprints, the resource, the production, the flow, you start seeing them everywhere. That election you read about? In a lot of countries, the candidates change, but the families funding them don't. That national champion company the government is so proud of? Trace the shares up the ownership tree, and you'll often hit a family office in a tax haven. That new stadium, that new airport, that new bank. Follow the money up, and the names repeat. We're taught that the old age of dynasties ended, that we replace kings with citizens. But what actually happened is subtler. The dynasties didn't disappear. They took off the crowns, put on suits, and moved from the palace to the holding company. The throne didn't vanish. It just got an LLC. So why is family ownership so durable? Why do these families outlast revolutions, coups, and constitutions? 3 reasons. 1. Time horizon. A politician thinks in election cycles. 4 years, maybe 8. A CEO thinks in quarters. But a family thinks in generations. They're not trying to win the next vote. They're trying to hand something to their grandchildren. That patience is a superpower no government can match. 2. Secrecy by structure. Modern wealth doesn't sit in a castle you can point at. It sits in layers, trusts, holding companies, foundations, offshore entities, each one a curtain. By the time you peel them all back, the public has lost interest. You can't storm a Bastille you can't even find. 3, and this is the big one, they make themselves useful. The smart families learned the lesson the old kings died not knowing. Pure domination breeds revolution. So instead, they trade jobs, stability, subsidies, services, a functioning phone network. They give the population just enough that the cost of overthrowing them feels higher than the cost of tolerating them. It's not love, it's a deal. And as long as the deal holds, the family keeps the country. And maybe you're thinking, okay, but I don't live in a petro-state or a chaebol economy. Why does this matter to me? Because the model is spreading, not shrinking. Look at where wealth is going almost everywhere on Earth right now, concentrating into fewer hands, passed down rather than earned. The tools the old families used, generational patience, layered secrecy, becoming indispensable, those tools are available to anyone rich enough to use them. And increasingly, they are. The countries we looked at today aren't exceptions. They might be previews. They're what happens when the wall between private wealth and public power doesn't just crack, but quietly disappears. Let's go back to that hotel in Riyadh. When the doors finally opened and the billionaires walked out, the official story was that corruption had been cleaned up. But the deeper story was the oldest one there is. A reminder of who the country actually belongs to. The maps in your school textbook show borders, capitals, flags. But there's another map underneath it, a map of names. Families who own the oil, the factories, the pipes, the toll booths of nations. They don't appear in elections. They rarely appear in the news. But they're there, on every continent, playing a longer game than any of us. So the next time a government tells you who's in charge, ask a different question. Not who governs, but who owns. Because those are very often not the same people. The richest, smartest families on Earth figured out something a long time ago. Thrones get stormed, but ownership just compounds. If this rewired how you see the world even a little, that's exactly what this channel is for. Pulling back the curtain on how power and money actually work. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you want to go deeper, watch this video next, where I break down the countries that got rich by cheating. It's the perfect sequel to this one. I'll see you there.